tell me what you want to do with the rest of your life. And if they come back and say, well, I'd like to design the greatest widget in the world and see 1 billion of them produced and make a butt ton of money, I'd say civil's probably not for you, because we don't do the same thing twice ever. Civil engineers meet the people's needs. We design the quality of life. Now, we don't always get to build it, but we certainly design it.
Welcome to the Level Design Podcast, a podcast for architects and engineers who want to thrive in this industry by creating more freedom, fulfillment, and financial security. Join us in uncovering how to restore value and honor to the unique people who choose to be designers and caretakers of our built world, and why it's essential to the future of our society, our industry, and our planet.
I know we have a lot to talk about, but you mentioned to me earlier that I got the sense, you didn't think you were going to be a civil engineer. You didn't really plan on it. It happened and then it ended up being great. Tell me about that. How did that end up happening?
Yeah, that's great. Well, I started out in a not great school system. Let's try it that way. A rural school system, 100 miles outside of DC. And the story, it's not so much a joke. We were the guinea pig. You want to know why you have fluoride in your toothpaste? It's because they came to my school system, put it in half the tubes and took it out of half the tubes and make us brush our teeth and see who had the most cavities. So if they wanted to test anything on anybody, it was us. Anyway, by early in probably about 8th or 9th grade, I decided I wanted to be an architect. And by 10th or 11th grade, I'd found my aptitude for math and science. So I said, well, maybe I want to be an architectural engineer. And so I picked my university based on what I thought was the best architectural engineering program in the 5 universities that I looked at. And as during the freshman icebreaker, the first week I was there, I was informed by one of the faculty that they had canceled the architectural engineering program. So I'm there. You didn't have to declare a major other than a field, engineering. They had a common freshman year. So I guess they felt no obligation or had no way of knowing that I was showing up for the wrong reason. So I spent the year trying to figure out what it is I wanted to do. And by the end of the year, when I had to declare a major, a department, if you will, I declared civil only because what I had learned about the other ones was even more dissatisfying. Now, that said, what I had learned in the intro classes, whatever, is completely wrong. And what I found, starting off as a structural civil and then switching to an environmental civil, was that civil engineering was a whole lot more creative than they were making it. In fact, the reason I walked away from structures was I didn't find the creativity and the impact that I wanted to have as an individual. And my father was an entrepreneur, a businessman, and he had spent his entire life in service to the people, his clients. My dad would get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, work 10 o'clock at night, 7 days a week, because one of his clients might need something. My mother was a school teacher. We spent many a dinner with my grandparents next door because my mother was taking care of some kid at school or trying to better herself by getting a master's or whatever. So that idea of service was part of it. That was ingrained. And so by co-oping, by getting into the field, by doing the things that I did early in my career, and then ultimately the academic pathway that represents a substantial part of my life, though you can parse my life out in about 3 tracks parallel. That was a way that I could see where I could be different. I was teaching in a university where I wanted to change who it was that was graduating to be a civil engineer, change their standards, change their skill set, change their focus. And I did that for 45 years, over 5 decades, and had some successes, had some failures, as you do with anything you do. That's me. So started off as an architecture engineer, ended up as a civil structure, made a career out of civil environmental, civil water resource, and I wouldn't trade a day. I have done things that I would have never imagined I could have done back at the front end of this trek. And I'm not finished.
Yeah, I love it. And it seems like you really stopped along the way to see what you wanted to do. You had free thinking in making a choice and, okay, I'm in this field, but what kind of work do I want to be doing? You seem to be very intentional about that. You also mentioned earlier in our conversation, like the difference between a job and a career. Could you kind of elaborate on that?
Sure. The first part is you're absolutely correct. If all I was going to do is pull a paycheck, I don't know. I wouldn't be here today. It was about the opportunity to give, not the opportunity to get. Being satisfied with what I got as long as I had the opportunity to give. That it was really a work-life balance issue. Now, I'm not saying that I didn't subscribe to a philosophy that is admittedly outdated, going to the workforce development, work-life balance issues. I grew up at a time where you basically did what the employer expected you to do. You expected to work at that same employer for a long time. You gave them loyalty. They gave you loyalty, or at least you thought they did. And you built a career of impact, and you built it in a way that was based on the areas of interest and your aptitudes. So yes, and there's been benchmarking or milestoning along the way. Where am I today? What do I want to do tomorrow? And I will also admit that every door that I hoped to walk through didn't get opened. And a lot of times then I'd find there was actually a window that I could crawl through that was better than the door. And fortunately for me, none of those windows were at 35 stories. And so they were successful, at least in the sense that I have, as I said already, I have no regrets. The work-life balance piece, I think, is integral to this. The idea of finding your passion about what you want to do and hopefully recognize that you have an opportunity, if not an obligation, to be impactful in the lives of others. The way my parents put it to us, always leave it better than you found it. I borrowed my neighbor's car a couple of years ago now. Mine was in the shop. My wife had something to do. I borrowed her car and ran an errand that was probably put 150 miles on the vehicle. Before I returned it, had the oil changed. I filled it up with gas. I took it to the car wash, washed it inside and out, cleaned it up completely, returned the car with no comment. Here it is. Thanks a lot. And it was just that concept of return it better than you found it. Now, ironically, it took 3 months before my neighbor even realized the car had been cleaned out. But I didn't do it because I wanted recognized. I did it because I felt it was my responsibility. It's the way we should function. And as a professional, that's part of what we're doing. I mean, as Miles, as you and I briefly mentioned, I feel that as a professional, I'm a professional 24/7, 365. I feel that everything I do has to be done through the lens of a professional. And again, you can frame professionals a lot of ways, but because of licensure and my involvement with ASCE and NCAAS and my licensure board and other organizations, and the committees I serve on at ASCE as well, the mantra that I actually required of the students when I taught senior design was, when I ask, what's the purpose of licensure? What is the purpose of being a professional? Bottom line, protect the health, safety, and welfare of the public first and foremost. Where did I get paid in all that? That wasn't the issue. Where did I get rewarded for that? Wasn't the issue. As a professional, it's about service before self. Good Rotary mantra. The idea is to find ways to be impactful and leave it better than the way you found it. And in doing that, you make lives better, you make people happier, you make people healthier. And I'm sorry, if you don't get some level of satisfaction seeing the quality of life improve because of what you did, go get a job.
Yeah.
So, I mean, in the context of what we're saying, literally, just go get a job. If you'll be happy. The smile as you hand the cup of Starbucks to somebody. If you're the barista, just go get a job.
Yeah.
Okay.
Dennis, as you were speaking, I reflected on a recent encounter. There was a lady that was tasked with by the state to go out into the school systems and invoke interest in engineering. And that was her job. And she reached out to me and she goes, look, I have to ask you a question. In 5 years of doing this, not only one person in middle school and high school was interested in civil engineering. And she goes, I actually didn't know what to say. So can you tell me what civil engineers do? And I said, well, what engineering are they asking you? Of course, it's computers, electronics, it's
robotics.
Mechanical. Yep. And what struck me is, and a lot of reasons where we do this podcast and when we created Level, a lot of that is, and I hope you could join me in speaking to it, is when you say civil engineering, it's actually giving you the fundamentals to almost have this unlimited career path where you can shift. You can say, I'm kind of tired of this. I'm going to do that. And you actually don't have to start over. it's almost this very strange or wonderful degree to get, or set of degrees, to actually have this big smorgasbord of work where you can change and divert and learn more, and you never get set back. It's almost like you can do this or that. And I think civil engineering is just this wonderful life where you can change and not get stuck. And I don't know if you can speak to that, but I think it's a wonderful career.
Well, and I agree 100%, 110%. I'll apply a little inflation factor and make it 125%. Obviously, when I was serving as a director of the school or department head of a civil engineering department, I'd have parents and students come through and they'd go, tell me about civil engineering. And this is the way I would attack the answer to the young lady you were referencing. I'd never answer that question, at least not front on, because I'm notorious for answering questions with more questions. But I did in this case for a particular reason. My answer back was, tell me what you want to do with the rest of your life. Okay. And if they come back and say, well, I'd like to design the greatest widget in the world and see 1 billion of them produced and make a butt ton of money, I'd say civil's probably not for you, because we don't do the same thing twice ever. Every building, every foot of road, every water treatment plant, every fill in the blank building, landfill, everyone's different.
Every project's an individual. Yeah,
exactly. I have a good friend, former student, who runs a company. He builds Dollar Generals. From the outside, they look absolutely the same, and he will tell you quickly every one of them is absolutely different. Different ingress, egress, foundation, wind load, snow load, rain load, foundation issues, power load issues, heating, cooling issues, and the list goes on.
Yeah.
Same looking little steel frame building, totally different every time. Yeah, because it has to fit the environment it sits in. And that's the point. We always have to deal with the environment we fit in. The other piece of that question, and the thing that I would advocate for, is how many people, and I go back to what I was saying, how many people here would like to be impactful? And again, this resonates really well with the people that have been coming out of school for the past 20 years. How many people want to do something special? Well, you find that most high schools these days require students to do service before they graduate. So there's a service component being instilled in these students. Why the high school doing? I don't know. Maybe they wanted the park to be cleaned up, and they're not carrying it the full measure, full yard. But we can pick that up and run with it. You want to be impactful? You want to change the world? You want to be a change agent? Tell me where you can do that on the petrochemical line as a chemical engineer. Tell me where you can do that on the production line as an industrial engineer. Tell me where you can do that running power lines as an electrical engineer, or designing circuit boards in an ultra clean room. Civil engineers meet the people's needs. As my license plate says, civil engineers, we design the quality of life. Now, we don't always get to build it, but we certainly design it.
My mantra is very close. It's we design human convenience, everything around you.
Well, Steve Oliver, back when HBO was still running in a different format and was less streaming and more cable oriented, one of his early, maybe season 3, he does almost a civil engineering presentation. He talks about the infrastructure. And the point that he makes is that when civil engineers do their job right, nothing happens.
Yeah, right.
The bridge didn't fail. People didn't die in mass because of some bacterial infection they got from the water.
If Miles goes fishing, do you have to worry about the fish you eat? Not
exactly. Yeah, or maybe you should, but
it's pretty good, though. It's pretty good. Yeah, we have some isolated things. We have work to do, right, Dennis?
Given where we could be, we're a whole lot better off. Where we will be is, another question, because it's just the nature of the beast.
One of the things that I talk to, again, a lot of what we do is an infrastructure here, and on this podcast, we do lots of other things, but this particular podcast focus on our American way of life is really based on our infrastructure and our economies. And this thing that we're really getting in, the group of citizens in America are getting kind of entitled and expect infrastructure just to be there. And
40 years.
Yeah.
40 years of that mindset.
Oh my gosh. So, a lot of this is just kind of, say, embrace it. I told Miles, I said, Miles, you own more infrastructure than you do in all of your personal property together.
Yes.
And, did you know that? Miles is like, what? And I go, yeah, far more. And then I go, do you know it costs When it gets to a D or infrastructure, all of it gets to a level D, it takes twice as much to maintain it, your dollars. Get it up to where it's actually cheaper to maintain. And this conversation about, look, this is your economy. This is American jobs. It's not a bad thing to invest in your infrastructure. And these are the things. But always I am fascinated with this thing called civil engineering and infrastructure is a growing industry. It's never going to go away. Why wouldn't you make your career there?
Correct. And of course, if it ever did go away, we'd all be living in the woods by ourselves on dirt roads, drinking out of a puddle in front of our house and crapping in a puddle and behind our house. And it just completely correct. I mean, of course, the way I also frame it is when we talk about public works or civil infrastructure, we have to recognize that that's also commercial works. That's industrial works. That's municipal works. So because we build a good road, an ambulance can now get to your house and take you away if needed. Amazon or whomever you're buying your most recent package from can get to your house and take it away. And you can get to the grocery store, which, by the way, wouldn't have anything if it wasn't for that road bringing goods in that you could then purchase and take out. So the economic growth and development. The other piece of course, is security. If we had to move military vehicles from point A to point B and we didn't have roads we have today. In fact, the whole interstate system was conceived of by a general, Eisenhower, on in part the idea of being able to reliably move to respond to threat, at least in large part. And so you have this interconnected piece, but I think the really disheartening part of it, Scott, is this, what you call entitlement. And I call it lack of understanding or education. When I was early in my career, I always advised young civil engineering undergraduates to take economics class because I knew they didn't have it in high school, because I didn't have it in high school. And most people, I guess, don't have it in high school. But just fundamental economics. I see people today saying, boy, I wish I didn't have to pay any taxes. To which I respond, works for me. Get off my road. Stop drinking my water. Go live someplace where we don't have to deal with you. Go be independent. And by the way, I'll let you go ahead and be, protected by our national defense, or maybe not. There's a disconnect. There's a lack of education. And I lay that at the people that should be doing the education. It's the politicians and it's the civils. It's us. We're part of the problem.
Well, there it is, right? I think we're our own worst enemy. We did this to ourselves.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. The most conservative group of people I ever run across is civil engineers. They'll even argue against, you would think civils would be out there arguing for tax increases or levies or fees or whatever to increase the civil infrastructure. No, they're out there arguing against it. They've even got the disconnect. But part of it, I think, also is the fact that when we talk about these resources, funding resources, we don't make the connection. If you do this, this is what you can get. It goes back to your analogy with miles, as it were. If you had a house, would you let it go 50 years without painting it and keeping a roof on it and doing the repairs? Or would you do those repairs and re-roof the house and keep paint on it more as needed basis?
And that road in front of your house is not an option, is it? Or that interstate system or that arterial or that.
You haven't seen the road in front of my house.
It's just not optional. Why aren't we celebrating and being prideful about our infrastructure and our economy and the efficiencies of these systems? This is prideful stuff. And, let's talk about that.
Well, part of it is we don't have much to brag about on infrastructure anymore. We're ranked 13th in the world. 3 years ago, we were ranked 26th. And with IIJA and IRA and some collateral investment, coupled with a greater and greater push in some states for public-private partnerships. So now I've got a new, but keep in mind, when you got a public-private partnership, private's going to make money off of this, or they're not going to be involved. Public means nonprofit. So which cost do you want to pay? But whatever the dubage is, we've been able to see a substantial increase in our infrastructure, but still 13th. We used to be number one. We used to have something we could brag on 40 years ago, 30 years ago. But there's a lot of work to be done. Really, it goes back to what you said, Scott. If I don't maintain it, the way it needs to be maintained, then X number of years out, 10, 15, 3, the cost of maintaining it goes up. I have more potholes. I have more accidents. I have more obstructions. I have more road blockages. I have more sinkholes. And then you go another 5, 10, 3 years out, the cost goes up even more. And it does get to the point that after some defined period, you might as well just rebuild it, tear it out, rebuild it. And how many people, and they can't understand that, most people anyway, but they certainly could explain that if I don't keep the paint on, if I don't keep the roof on, if I don't make the repairs, you're going to have to rebuild that house every 20 years. And they'd be like, well, I can't afford that. Well, yeah, that's the point.
Yeah, super. How do we make it so we're not complaining as civil engineers, but we're turning it into a fun, celebratory thing that we have? Rather than it's a burden, it's a tax, it's delaying my, I hate construction. It just delays me from getting to work. How do we get from that way of thinking to this celebratory? I tell Miles, I said, Miles, did you stop and give donuts to the guys working on the crew on the road and say thank you? Miles like, what? I'm like,
in your dreams.
Yeah, right. I mean, how do we get there?
Every day since I've done it. That's why I'm always late. Yeah, there's a disconnection, right? There's a huge disconnection and lack of ownership. And I don't think there's an easy way to make that connection. Obviously, conversations like this is a start, but people need to take ownership and understand that it's actually theirs.
Well, and that's why what you two are talking about is at least one component or one brick in the answer. And that is get people to understand that that isn't a county road or a state road or a highway road. It's your road.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You paid for it, at least in some part, to some degree. You use it, you rely on it. And as such, you should expect that it be maintained. Now, what does that involve? What's the next step? And how do I make sure that it's maintained and all the rest of that then gets to be the process that has to be done. Going back to the initial question, Scott, I think for me, the problem has been, and we kind of danced through it or past it or over it, it's the fact that we as civil engineers for most of our career have been told to keep our mouth shut. Come in, fix the problem, go away quietly, everybody's happy. And we let the politicians or the industry or the executives tell the story. Oh, we just had a great bridge opening. What do we have to do to have this great bridge opening? We have a ribbon cutting on a new facility. Well, what do we have to do? Why do we have the facility? What's the purpose of the facility? How does that plug into your life? How is this going to impact you? They can tell that story, but they don't tell the rest.
I don't know how many times as a director I've been in front of in the city manager or government manager position and them looking at me going, you do not say this and you do not say that and you say it this way. And I'm like, but you're not informing and celebrating your infrastructure. You're not celebrating the result of a sales tax for road maintenance.
Right.
Nope, you don't say that, Scott. This is what you're going to say. And I'm like, this is crazy.
Well, and I'll draw back to a person that I know, actually a relative, who made a comment, totally bogus, but I think it's reflective of the mindset. And he was complaining about the fact that their property tax had just gone up. Mm-hmm. And I understand that because it went up and he doesn't know why it went up. So he has to extrapolate. So what is his extrapolation? His extrapolation is his home tax, property tax went up because the county wanted to build bike lanes on some of these roads. Well, to him, bike lanes have zero value.
Yeah.
He hasn't ridden a bike in 20 years.
Sure.
And bikes are a nuisance on the road. And so he's got that kind of a mindset. So you're building something I'd rather not see built, and it's costing me money. So I'm not saying that's where the money went, but that's what he believes. And I can understand his argument in that case. So again, it goes back to we have to explain to people that there's some people that want that bike lane. Mm-hmm. And what you have to make them realize is you're not going to pay enough taxes for that bike lane to be put in. So Bob Smith down the street is going to have to pay some taxes to help us put in that bike lane for you. So it's a shared resource. It's a shared ownership. And by the way, you're going to have to pay some taxes to help do whatever it is that Bob Smith would like to see to do to maintain his quality of life.
Yeah. I know ASCE's been around a long time, Dennis. How long has it been around?
Oh, Lord. I don't know. What's it say on this thing? 100 we're coming up on our 150th year. 2027 is our 150th.
150th year. And isn't it interesting that the first two words in a 150-year organization is American Society?
1852, the American Society of Civil Engineers, oldest national engineering organization.
I love what you just said. I love that it's the American Society. We're a society that shares infrastructure, shares in the cost, not focused on the differences within that society, but focused on shared benefit.
Well, and keeping in mind that, albeit we talk about American society, we actually have members and units, sections and branches in 177 countries.
Of course.
And which is also why we've gone kind of just talking about ASCE. It's kind of like most of the big companies that have an international presence just use the initials. But yeah, it is. You're on the right track, though. It is a society. It is a profession. It's a profession of civil engineers and those who are supportive of civil engineers. The tent for ASCE has gotten much larger intentionally. You don't have to be a civil engineer to get to be a member of ASCE, but we are looking for people that are affiliated with and supportive of what it is civil engineers do, and that by and large is civil infrastructure.
Yeah.
Looking for a new opportunity? Interested in being part of an expanding network of independent engineers and architects who are thinking differently? Level Design Partners is on a mission to create prosperity for design professionals, the industry, and the world, using innovative business systems and a culture of collaboration. We believe that traditional education and firm structures want you to be a cog in their machine, depriving you of key skills needed to thrive, thus commoditizing an entire industry in the process. Gain access to skills, tools, and systems by partnering with Level Design Partners. Learn more at leveldesignpartners.com.
Let's play a little interesting thing with Miles, just for fun.
Word association.
Yeah. Miles, if you go to the sink, you're going to turn on the water.
I've already failed this quiz.
You haven't turned on the water?
No, I'm kidding. I just don't know. I'm not going to know the answer.
See, we panicked him already. We already panicked Miles. All right. So Miles, how confident are you that you're going to turn on that water and the water is going to come out?
Pretty confident. Very, some might say 100%.
How did you get there that you got that confident?
Data, just every day.
Life experience. Entitled. You're entitled to it. When you throw the lever, you're entitled to it coming on.
Yeah. And then you get frustrated if it doesn't.
When was the last time you turned the valve and it didn't come there?
Yeah, that's a good question. Oh, it has happened, but I'd say a handful of times in my life.
Yeah. And probably by the end of the day, it was back.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So let's talk about this. This is only one really small element of infrastructure things we do.
You want to switch to something else? You do remember I'm in Mississippi, right?
Okay.
It's not turning the valve on and getting water. It's turning the valve on and what it is that comes out.
The quality.
That gets to be the question.
Quality issue. Oh my gosh. Well, I just think for the listener that might be, not really understanding civil engineers and might be like, yeah, whatever. Let's relate it to something that is in their home and on their life. And what does this civil engineering thing mean? And what's your expectation that you can take a shower in it, Miles, and not get sick? What's your percentage?
I've done some traveling, and when you go to certain countries, you immediately appreciate all the little conveniences that we've become entitled to.
Yeah. You're not taking a bath in the river that 50 million people are taking a crap in, right? Are you?
Right.
I don't know. I hope you're not doing that.
Unless you live in New Orleans.
Yeah, unless you live in New Orleans. Are you 90% sure when you take a shower in America, you're going to not get sick?
100%, yeah.
100%. Isn't that interesting? How did that happen?
It's pretty impressive if you think about it. The scale, the amount of people condensed into these areas has to come from somewhere. And, water is not infinite. I mean, it is, but it's not, right? So how do we get it to a point?
Yeah, let me jump in and say again, there's a level of expectation and not just quantity, but quality in this. Going back to the did you get sick piece. And there's a word that's out there. It's kind of the elephant in the room in many regards. but I'll bring it up and pull on its trunk, and it's called regulation. At the end of the day, the fact that the same regulations, the same expectations for water quality exist throughout the U.S. means that I can travel throughout the U.S. without having worry about where's my next bottle of water coming from, or am I going to get sick from the vapors of the hot shower that I'm trying to take, or am I going to develop a long-term neurologic disease as a result of having cooked with the water that came out of the tap. All of which have happened in the United States, but not with the frequency that deter or have impacted our confidence in that yet.
And we're good at learning from our mistakes.
Yeah, we would hope so. We would. I mean, and knowing how to ensure that quality, again, we get back to the civil engineer. The story that I tell, or the analogy that I'll give you, is the question I've come to ask is infrastructure. Both you guys and the listeners, I'm sure, know when I say, what's the wrong side of the tracks? You know what I'm talking about, right? Okay. So I reframe it. And the question becomes, who designed and built the wrong side of the tracks? Answer, civil engineers. Why? Because when we built the tracks back in the 1800s, we were worried about one thing: low cost, shortest distance, safe travel. The tracks were everything. The environment we destroyed wasn't anything. The habitat we destroyed wasn't anything. The species that we endangered or caused to go extinct weren't anything. And the communities we divided by building that infrastructure were not a consideration. So when we built the tracks, the people that were downwind from all this noise and dirt and filth that the train produced that went on the tracks, the people that could move out of that downwind area moved leeward and got out of it. The people that couldn't had to stay. And so that's something we can't do anymore. We really have to be respectful of the community, build infrastructure that celebrates the community it's being built in, not physically taxing it in the sense of destroying it. And we're doing more and more of that. That's the other aspect that I think could be exciting to the next generation.
Oh, for sure.
It's not doing what we did for the past 150 years.
Yes.
It's doing what we need to do for the next 150 years.
And do it better. Yep.
Doing it better, cheaper, faster, sustainable.
Yeah, we're from nature. We're not really, we got to get out of the space of nature's for our use. We're more in the thinking of nature's important because that's where we're from.
We're supposed to be stewards of nature. Go look that up. That doesn't mean we get to rape the planet. It's just not. We need to work harmoniously, and there's benefits to doing so.
Right. Dennis, I would love to hear from you in, pulling from your experience, both sides of the spectrum. So a young, kind of up and coming, excited engineer who's just getting going, or maybe they're still in school, right? Or they're at the beginning of the career. And then also someone who's maybe in the, middle or nearing the end of their career. What opportunities do you see out there for both sides of the spectrum?
I thought I'd heard all the questions. That's one I've never been presented with. Let me distill down to say that I think the advantage for somebody coming into the profession on the front end, the young engineer, and I'm also going to put a dark side or cloud in the sky when we finish hanging this picture. The opportunity is that if they look at this profession as one which allows them to create new solutions for new problems in ways that have never been done before, that can be quite rewarding, quite exciting, quite impactful. The education, the skill set, and the body of knowledge that we have today in order to do that is unlike anything we've had before. When I got into this profession, we didn't even know what equations to use to design a biological reactor with. We were guessing. Okay. We had 3 different models out there. We were comparing to see which one worked best. And eventually we settled on it, and the profession became more mature in that regard. That maturity has led to other options and opportunities such that the new generation can apply civil engineering approaches, methodologies, technologies in unique ways that solve problems that we didn't think could be solved. And that is what the young generation has on its doorstep. The negative side of this, we had talked about offline just a little bit earlier, and I'm not going to get down too far into that. The negative part of that is that they're going to walk into an environment which potentially will be so stifling that they're not allowed to do that. there's an environment where we've all heard it. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. No. If it ain't broke, it's only because it hasn't broken yet. If it ain't broke, it's only because it needs to be replaced and nobody's paying attention to it. No. What we have been doing is no longer viable for the world we live in.
Mhm.
Climate change, socioeconomic pressures, political structures, whatever you want to frame it on. We got to do better. We got to do different. And the young generation knows how to do that or is willing to invest and do it. We just have to have an environment that lets them do it. They're there. The environment's there. But my caution to the young generation is recognize that not all environments are created equal. You might find yourself.
Just to be super clear, a lot of what you're referring to is kind of the business model, the ecosystem that people are working in nowadays, and firms.
Yeah, when I say environment, the work environment. Yeah,
Right.
Not the trees and rivers and streams. I'm talking about the work environment that they're going to be in. Because after all, that's part of their life too. Yeah. Now, the mid-career people have a challenge because they've been brought up under the dinosaurs, the end of career people. And they have been rewarded and embraced that model. And it's going to be hard for them to understand that the generation coming up behind them doesn't embrace, doesn't recognize, and doesn't treasure that model. They're looking for a different reward system. They're looking for a work-life balance that the dinosaurs have no concept of.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I can't tell you the number of people that I have known that said, if I had something to retire to, I would retire to yesterday. But all I know is what I'm doing today. They have destroyed their lives to the point where they have but one facet left. And that's the job they're doing today. It defines them. It is what they can do. And that's all they do. They have nothing else to go to, no other interest. And I feel sorry for them. But for the mid-career people, don't become dinosaurs. Embrace that. And then the second piece of that, in embracing it, become champions, become mentors, become the people that the younger generation needs. The bad news is the younger generation have been told you can go forth and do anything, which they can, except they're not equipped for it. It's going to take collaboration with the mid-career people to help them come up to speed to know what it is without stifling that creativity. And then the third piece that I'll throw off on the mid-career people, there's a very different complexion to the people coming in as young engineers, a broader diversity, an inclusiveness, an expectation that the job is going to provide an environment that supports their personal career. That's called equity. So they want an equitable environment in which to work, one which rewards them and facilitates their success as they define it, which hopefully aligns with the way the company defines it. And it's going to be the mid-level managers that see that. Some of the dinosaurs I've argued with in the past think that all I have to do is provide everybody the same thing, and the good ones will succeed and the bad ones will fall away. My analogy back to that particular individual I was arguing with in this point was, well, if I hired two people and I gave them exactly the same computer with exactly the same software, and one of them was blind and the other one had no hands, I've been fair. I've been equal with them, but have I been equitable? Am I going to get my best productivity out of these two people? And the answer is, of course, no. So that's what the mid-level manager has to ensure, that everybody walking into this profession. So it means that the realities of society, it means you're going to have guys that are willing to work 60 hours a week because they want to. They don't have anything else. They enjoy what they're doing, and they don't coach Little League, and they don't coach basketball, and they don't have kids and whatever. And you're going to have other guys that come in, and guys, by the way, is a
gender.
It's not. Yeah, thank you. That's the word I was struggling with. It's a non-gender word. You're going to have guys, but that's my point. This isn't gender-based. You're going to have guys come in of all genders, likes, colors, creeds, shapes, and sizes, and hairstyles that are going to come in and teach, coach Little League, involved in church, have a family, and therefore aren't willing to spend 60 hours. But when they spend the 40, you're going to get a whole lot more out of them because they're happier, they're rounded, they're supported, and recognizing that. And then you're going to have another group of guys that maybe have to deal with childcare. And their decision is going to be whether or not I work for you or whether or not I stay home and take care of the kids, whatever, homeschool, whatever it may be, because I have no options. The company's not helping me take care of my kids. The whole model that we've lived on in this country for the past 150 years has been, it's a single guy walking in and he's left the family at home. How many times, I don't know if you guys ever lived it. I can't tell you the number of times I've heard people say, I wish so-and-so would just leave the house at home. The wife burned the toast. Who you mean the wife burned the toast? Who said the wife even made the toast? He burned the toast, that kind of mindset. And it's like, no, you can't leave the family at home. The family's part of who you are. Let's recognize, let's celebrate that. And I think that's the mid-level management. And if you want to go to end of term, the dinosaur family, my suggestion for them, get the hell out of the way. I mean, seriously, grow a brain for a change. Understand, I can't tell you the number of old fogies that are still sitting there thinking about things in the same way and expecting everybody to toe their line.
Yeah.
And I said, and by the way, I've seen old fogies that were 30 years old.
Yeah, true.
So it's not a chronological thing, but personally, that kind of thinking, the kind of disruptive, denigrating, destructive thinking is something that our profession just can't put up with anymore.
Well, when you map the trend in firms and in work environments where they're just starting to treat engineers and designers as commodities.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, there's that. Map that on top of that,
Well, yeah, that's the next side of this. We were talking about the 3 phases of engineering. Why are engineers being treated as commodities? Because the people treating as commodities aren't engineers.
That's right.
I would never treat another engineer the way the people running corporations treat engineers.
That's right.
And why do they do that? Because they're business people. And they treat us like we're still on the plantation.
Yeah.
If I need you, I need you. I don't. I buy you, I sell you. What's going on in DC right now? I send you 3,000 termination letters telling you that you didn't perform. How do I know you didn't perform? I don't even know who the hell you are. I just happen to have your email address. And I know I want to get rid of you because I don't want to pay your salary anymore. Just that simple. But, this kind of, you're a commodity. I can buy you. I can sell you. I can replace you in a heartbeat. That kind of, I call it plantation mentality. Again, Mississippi. But it's not, it's a business mentality. Same concept. People are commodities. And in that same regard, how do engineers produce? Well, we produce by billable hours. So I want you to have, I remember when 50% billable hours was a good number in a consulting firm. If you're doing 50% billable hours today, you're probably on the brink of getting fired. I mean, just, 80%. I mean, really? I've got to bill you every time I go to the restroom. That's mail fraud, unless I'm an environmental engineer, and then I can write it off as a learning experience.
Well, Miles, how's that received? I mean, certainly me and you have been working for almost a decade and offering a new way of working for engineers and architects. And how does that land for you? You've got almost a decade of work of providing a new way of working. How does that land with you?
It's very validating to hear someone like Dennis basically echoing what you've been saying and what we've been saying for a while. Commoditization of engineers and architects, the business, it's run by business people. We want to bring it back to built for, built by, collaborative, a little more entrepreneurial, not necessarily go out and start it on your own, but like what we offer is more of a hybrid where you can get the support, you can get the mentorship, which is another huge pillar of what we are building and believe in, but also have the autonomy, the flexibility, the choices to build the career that you want so that you don't end up stuck like with a dinosaur mindset where you're not able to, you're just looking for your retirement. We don't want that.
Can I jump in with a potential solution? It's not original only in the sense that I learned it when we were setting up my third business. And then it carried across into my 4th business. And for those that are paying attention, when I talk about business, I'm not talking about, an individual consultant, which is what I do now. We had 25 people working for us. As I said, at one point, we were making $25 million a year. And this was sidelined to my full-time university job. So I had partners and we worked. And my one partner said to me, real epiphany moment. We were on a plane coming out of Canada after I just designed a treatment plant that saved a corporation $99 million, that's a whole nother story. So I won't get into that one just yet. Anyway, at least not in this episode. But he looked at me and said, the problem with civil engineers is you've got this mindset of billable time. I work X number of hours, I set a fee, and I work against that fee, and I charge. He said, the problem with that is you come in and solve the world's problems, And the value you have provided far exceeds the billable hours. So if you have effectively, and the way I'll frame it for this conversation is, if I came in and designed a facility, and I'm going back to my Canada job. If I came in and designed a facility that cost somebody $1 million and saved them $99 million, okay, and my fee is part of that $1 million, just actually a small part of that $1 million, should I not capture some of that $99 million value that the company gets to walk away with? Should we not share in the value? So the model for civil engineers, if you want to make money, isn't billable hours. That commoditizes, that diminishes. And what happens then is it's also promote to corruption. I do an entire treatment plant, but it's just a cookie cutter of the last one I did. So I'll bill you the same number of hours again. That's fraud. Okay. If you're sticking to the hours. But the idea is, the value of this facility is this, and you're going to make such and such, and I'm going to make such and such, and we're going to share in the value. And the difference is I get the value up front, and you're going to get the value for the life of the project. The analogy that I'd give you is taking that model, my last formal company, my last corporation, we were a C Corp. We would come in and make a proposal for a lump sum fix on a project. And in the way we designed the project, I can't even tell you what my billable hours would have been. It totally irrelevant from where I was to what I was actually making per hour invested in it. But while I was thinking about all the money I was making off of this project, that company could take that project, put it in place. The capital cost was half to a third of what they were thinking about. The operating cost was low enough that the total project cost was paid off in 3 months by the energy savings. And the operational performance and capacity of the facility had been exceeded without any major renovation to the physical plant. So no major capital investment, no major construction, some minor adaptations, some equipment change out, process change, and I'm saving enough money that I've paid for all of it, substantially paid for the whole project in 3 to 4 months. And then every month after that, and again, at a cost that is horrendous. So think about what that value is. What is it that they're going to get, and what the payback is? And that's why I talk about life cycle cost analysis. One of the things I said a couple of years ago when we started pushing this at ASCE is people are looking for a competitive edge in the civil market. Well, here's your competitive edge. Walk up to an employer, a potential client, and explain to them why they're going to give you 20% more than you're going to give everybody else, and why the project's going to cost them 20% more than everybody else. And by the way, that 20% might be more like 50% because of the value you're adding to the project. Why would anybody ever do that? Because of the life cycle.
Only the engineering community and the dinosaurs would do that.
Well, but the piece is that that's true because they're positioned, but in the same sense, in a life cycle sense, if it costs me 20% more today to have a project that lasts twice as long or 3 times as long, or that eliminates maintenance issues, and that's what it is. You front load the cost for your service and for the facility so that the back end cost means you actually pay less in the wrong way.
Yeah, you're speaking my language. I tell Miles all the time, the fundamental problem with civil engineering, why 60% of all of our American engineers quit within 5 years, is because of this issue of we are in business systems that are archaic.
Yes.
And we've got to get out of these archaic business systems in engineering. And we got to provide a new business structure that's similar to the rest of the world that's moved on. We've failed to move on to a modern business structure. I just see firms getting larger and larger, buying smaller and smaller, and medium firms getting larger and larger. And it's a race to the bottom. It's like a race. The only way they compete with each other now at this point is they hire open overseas offices. It's like you're forcing the salaries even lower. It's just a race to the bottom with engineering. And it's like, why are we doing this to ourselves?
Well, and the end result is that you end up creating a work environment and all the other aspects of what could be a career and make it a job.
Mm.
And so we've already lost, I mentioned earlier, the loyalty factor, which I grew up with. We've already lost that. In the plantation mentality, there's no loyalty there on either direction. So we've destroyed that in this business model we're using. We're destroying the morale of the people working, chasing them off. And the people that are left behind are the people that, we may not even want, or at least aren't enough to do the job we need to do. So now we're starting to take shortcuts, and that'll come back and haunt us too. So,
Right.
Miles, how's that strike you? I mean, it's fun to watch, a leader such as Dennis, really, really top civil engineer, respected throughout the world. And how does it feel that poor Miles has heard this from me for years, and he's just starting to question how much.
Yeah, I can't take it anymore.
Can't take it anymore.
No, it's so exciting because, I'd say this a lot, like I'm marketing, branding, all sorts of things, but I'm not an engineer, I'm not an architect, but I feel like I am in a lot of ways. And it's a part of me now because I've been, by osmosis, I've been working on this mission in this ecosystem and in this industry for long enough now that I feel like I'm a part of it. And it's exciting to finally feel like we're recognizing the problems and we're doing something about it. We talk about how do we solve this? How do we solve this? But we are solving this in so many ways. It just might not feel like it's going to take time for it to scale.
Well, you've got people like Sean and yourself that are on the front edge of the envelope pushing as hard as you possibly can. And then you got all that dead weight sitting behind you that makes the friction coefficient, good engineering. It makes the friction coefficient so high that it's hard to move that envelope along. What we need to do is figure out ways of greasing the skids or dropping the weight. And I look at the young engineer and the mid-career engineer as the grease, and I look at the dinosaurs being dropped off as the weight. And that's it. And by the way, Miles, there's there's several really great online civil engineering bachelor's programs that if you want to get the degree,
there you go.
Just mention it. It's an academic plug.
Seed planted. Yeah. Dennis, this has been a pleasure. I definitely want to have you back on because we've only scratched the surface. But tell us quickly about your podcast and anything else you're working on and excited about. I know you have, a lot you're working on.
Yeah, being retired.
All right. Yeah. That's a testament right there to the way that you've approached your career.
Well, this third facet again, this new facet, if you will. A couple of years ago, I ran into a person who was, again, pushing the envelope. And he was dealing with the issue of trying to resolve contractual documents in these recently procured companies. He talking again about these agglomerations of small firms into one big firm. What he was finding in his market, he was more vendor than he's not an engineer. He's more vendor. So he was finding that he'd do the same job, but it was a different set of specifications. Just because they may have changed their name and the owner may have gotten a big buyout, but nothing had changed. And so he was trying to do that. And then he got into, and he realized that the real need, the real market opportunity was helping facilitate rapid deployment and rapid solution. Projects take 6 months to, it took almost 10 years for us to get around to build the building that I started on at Mississippi State. It got finished, but Lord knows it took a whole lot longer than it really needed to or should have. Well, on simple jobs, the municipal level, civil infrastructure level, these can be done much more efficiently. Well, he created, and I'm now co-founder with, there's 4 co-founders in the company working on different aspects, and I'm working on the information component, and it's called bid procurement. And so, but it's not about bidding. It's about helping vendors offer services to municipalities in an expeditious way. Instead of taking 2 to 3 months to get a contractor in to TV a sewer line, my forte, they could be on site in 3 days. Well, what do I know if I have that much information in 3 days as opposed to 3 months? Well, now I've also got the information I need to design and procure repairs, whether it be slip lining or excavation and trench and repair. And once you know that, then you come right back into the system, and here's a bunch of individuals who are qualified, capable, and a demonstrated capacity are ready to get online. Here's a scope of work and out the door. And what we've done is we're using artificial intelligence, working with the clients to put together the scope of work making sure nothing's missed, minimizing contingencies, change orders, and hopefully minimizing risk to the vendor that then comes in and does the work. At the same time, assuring that the municipality gets what they actually wanted, not what they thought they wanted, or not necessarily what they thought they asked for. So we're working on that. Now, that is a platform. My podcast, 21st Century Engineering, we've got a website, 21st Century Engineering. 21st is 21st.com. I'm interviewing mid-level and early-level engineers and people like Scott, ultimately, and people in the industry, in the mid-level and management level, to talk about how we as professionals plug into this work environment and how we can plug in a way that's more impactful and more beneficial, how to deal with. So in the podcast I've got so far, we've talked about work-life balance. We've talked about abandoning the corporate philosophy. We're talking about how I can maintain my service and philanthropic person as well as maintain my professional career. How can I be involved in professional organizations and be of service to others in multiple facets within the career? And so just looking at the different people and the different ways we manifest to hopefully, if nothing else, let that early generation, mid-level generation know that, yeah, you're not wrong. The dinosaurs are wrong. You can do this. And it's not that we know you can do it. We need you to do this to make it better for all of us. And that's what we're about.
Fantastic.
That's awesome.
So Scott's going to be on mine, I understand, one of these days, not too long.
Well, I look forward to it.
And we're going to return the favor because I want to find out more about where you are, Scott, how you got to where you are and the trajectory you see yourself on.
Yeah.
If you want, if Miles is up to it, I can bring both of you on and we'd have a take two. Whatever.
Yeah.
Except we're going to flip the script. This is going to be about you guys, not about me.
That'd be fun. Let's do that.
Thanks for listening. If you found value in this episode, support us by sharing it with someone or leaving a review. In upcoming episodes, we'll discuss the realities of the industry today and what the future may look like. It's our belief that positive changes for architects and engineers is not the obligation of the industry, but rather a choice you make to reimagine how we work together. We invite you to join us in creating a world in which design professionals thrive. Learn about our mission and get involved by following us wherever you listen to podcasts and subscribing to our newsletter at leveldesignpartners.com.